So we are in Leviticus, and as I've said a couple of times, I think that we probably won't do this, but my hope is to get through 4 chapters. Because 13, 14, and 15 all kind of work together. And I was really hoping that we would be down to chapter 12 2 weeks ago, but I don't think I would have been ready for it then, and I'm definitely not ready for it tonight. So it is what it is, and this, I don't normally do a lot of research, but I actually did research on chapter 12 and to figure out why I was. So with that, we're going to, chapter 12 means 2 paragraphs. So we'll read the first paragraph, which is 1 through 5, and then we will do 6 through 8. So 1 through 5. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, a woman conceives and bears a male child, and she shall be unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then she shall continue for 33 days, and the blood of her purified. She shall not touch anything holy nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification completed. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification for 66 days." Wow. Thus the reason I've done a lot of that.
Pregnant is what to Eastern Orthodox, and if she went through she had a baby and she did not go back to church for how many days.
Okay. Just to follow it, or did she have a reason?
That was how we did it.
Okay. But the question comes in, why the differentiation between male and child? So I'm going to ask for thoughts first before I put my thoughts down.
Could it be to keep her healthy? Could she be nursing her child?
Why would God prescribe twice as much for a female as a male?
Well, she didn't want her out in the front, or she gets sick.
Do you think female babies are less healthy than male babies?
I thought it was for the mother.
If you have a son, the mother is unclean for 7 days. On the 8th day, she's to bring the son in and he's circumcised.
Oh.
And then she's impure for another 33 days, so 40 days total. If she has a daughter, it's 14 days. She brings the daughter to be dedicated, and then she's impure for another 66 days.
Oh, I didn't understand.
80 days total.
Didn't.
Anybody have any thoughts? As I said, we're going to the shelf. Stuff that I don't normally like to deal with, but at least it's not the box. So, I said a little bit ago, our adopted daughter and son, they had their first child. And they're all excited. And they had a son, which is great. In the world of this day, what do they prefer to have, sons or daughters? Sons. Why? They would inherit. So if you have a male child, is there as much of a push to have another child?
No.
No. If you have a female child, is there push to have another child? Yes. Anybody know how long you're supposed, that doctors suggest you wait before you have sex?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. How long is 6 weeks? 42 days. 7 times 6 is 42. With a male son, 7 plus 33 is 40. It's almost right at 6 weeks. If she has a female, God is putting, remember what's the question I asked whenever we have a law that we don't understand?
Let's see who is protecting.
Who is this protecting? I think this is Samuel's theory only, because I've read all kinds of stuff, and I don't think that seems to make any sense, to be honest. My thought is, because there was such a push that a woman should bear sons, there was this period built in to let her body rest. We know now today, doctors say you should wait at least 6 weeks. It's better for 6 months, but you should wait at least 6 weeks before you engage in intercourse. So with a son, it's basically the 6 weeks. To keep the mother from being abused, from being pushed to get pregnant right away again, my thought is God built in a buffer extra to let the mother have that. She's being pushed to get pregnant again. That is just my theory. I openly admit that I might be wrong on this. But again, if we ask that question, when we don't understand the law, when it doesn't make sense to us, we have to believe God is putting this law in place to protect someone, right? We believe God is a good God, right? And we believe God does everything on purpose. So we see the purification is pretty close to what we already know today. And the purification for a female child, I think, builds in this double period to make sure that she isn't just being treated like a breeding. I don't know, what do you think? You go with that?
I think
Susan?
I think it'd be just the opposite. You're saying that they wanted a male, so if you had a female, you should be breeding quicker than with the female.
Thus would be the thought. But see, if you have a son, the father isn't going to feel as compelled to have the next child, right?
The waiting period would be longer there.
It wouldn't need to be as long because the dad is going to push to have a son. You know what I'm saying? So from my perspective, my guess is it's a built-in buffer. Because again, the story of Henry VIII, right? Founding of Church of England and what eventually became the Methodist Church. He had a wife, she didn't have an heir, so he divorced her. Killed her. And had another one. She couldn't have an heir, no? She had a daughter, actually. That was a good news, so therefore he divorced her. His third wife happened to also be the princess of Spain and cousin to the Pope, so the Pope would not grant a divorce for his third wife. But the reality is he was feeling compelled not just to have a child, he needed to have a male child. So for most men, once the first son was born, then the pressure to have kids was less. Now that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have more kids, it just means the pressure to have kids is less. And if the pressure is lessened, then dad's not like to go there and abuse his wife to try and get her pregnant. I said that's why this is on the channel. Not necessarily our everyday table conversations. But my guess is that by doubling for a female, he's building in a protection to allow the mother probably about as much time as she might get with his son, because dad is happy. He's got a son.
You know that thing, his love is.
I think so. I have to believe God makes his laws because he wants to good for us. And he wants to protect us and he wants us to be healthy and moving. And so I've racked my brain for, well, most of the summer in preparation. And the best I can come up with is that's a strategic answer as to why. You haven't given me any thoughts, you're just gonna leave me hanging?
I just want to hear on the side, I mean, then,
Okay,
says we don't really know why God gave this command. Sometimes God's instructions reflect the cultural views held during that time. The passage may reflect a higher value someplace on males. As a result, they may have been more careless about the health of the mother who bore girls. But the longer purification period was meant to protect the mother and daughter.
look at that. I had that. How much I had this? If I heard that before, again, I have to believe these laws are good. And so, yeah, that's. I don't feel as out on a limb now, knowing that somebody not only believed it, but they wrote it down and put it in the study. Any other thoughts, or do we want to finish the chapter? Finish chapter 6-8. And when the days of her purifying are complete, whether for a son or for a she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. And he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for it. When she shall be clean, this is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. And if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering, and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be. What do you think? What do you notice? What question?
Thinking of today's health standards, I can't see how burning a fish is already.
So if you're, I know you were here before, but you weren't. If you remember when it, and look back to it, it was talking about flow of blood, any wound or anything makes you unclean. Because we know today blood carries disease. And so therefore, my guess is that this is just so that society would welcome them back to them, regardless of whether they have done anything wrong or not. Remember, sin isn't just about doing something wrong. Sin means separation. The literal word for this offering was a separation. Remember when we put together our offerings? And so it's not just when you've done something wrong, but it's when there has been a split, a separation, a disconnect. And so there's an offering to God where realistically, my guess is at the tabernacle or the temple, when this was brought, it was seen as more of a celebration offering, not you've done something wrong, because she would have the child with her as she's bringing the offering. And who doesn't love when the kids come to church? Right? And so this was a way of saying, I had a child, I'm clean, I'm good, I'm not going to infect you, I'm not going to cause you any harm, and let's
So what are they gonna do when she has twins?
80 days. Well, I think it would just, I don't know that they would add them together. I think they would just take the longer one. If they're having to need to add the bare minimum, they need 80, maybe they need 120. If they have 20 girls, we're going to give them the full 160 just so that they have a half a year to themselves, right? Because they're not gonna get much sleep. Any other thoughts?
Basically, they make concubines like that though.
But it is part of the reason why I think there were, extra wives and concubines and things like that to keep the lineage going, because there was such a push to have male heirs and to have as many as you could, because that was your workforce. That's who kept the family business going. That's who made sure the clan survived. That's where you got your soldiers and your warriors from, to keep everybody protected and do the hunting.
I'm like, favorite. I mean, it's just, it's more on their mind all
Yes, God, why are you saying I'm going to have all these kids whenever my heir is a slave from Damascus? And so I think that realistically, this isn't necessarily a sin offering, but that's the term for it. This is a separation offering. These periods are not, they're called for purification because there are people who would see the fact that she had a flow of blood, that she had discharge. But since it comes out, it's not always pretty. So therefore, this is a way of integrating her back into society. By the same token, it does give the mother time to be away, to not, don't think of them. I want to say that this is not necessarily God saying you can't come into church. It's saying you don't need to come into church. Take care of your child, take care of yourself.
Because in some of our places of work, that's about the time some go back to work. And they're really, by the time baby's between 6 and 8 weeks old, and at least stretching sleeps out of them, it feels like they can function again.
Yeah. So realistically, from what we know today about healthy lifestyle and the child and the mother, maybe this isn't quite as foreign as it sounds. Maybe it isn't as cruel as it sounds either. What do you guys think? Any further thoughts on chapter 12? Okay, so I want to start, before we move to 13, I want to tell you guys this. So when we were starting the rest of it, our life, and before I re-entered the call to ministry, we were in a Sunday school class, and we were encouraged to read through the Bible. And the first time that I ever tried to read straight through Scripture, I got all the way to this chapter, 13, and I was like, I really don't want to read this. Because I read the title, Laws About Leprosy. Who here is excited about leprosy? Anybody? And I looked ahead and I thought, I'll just skip the chapter and go to the next one. 14, laws for cleansing lepers. Okay, what about 2 chapters in? 15. Laws about bodily discharge. Anybody feeling that? So we're done here. So Melissa and I, at the time, we were singing in our home church choir, and choir practice was on Wednesday nights. We both have kind of lost our voice since then. One night, the night that I was in this section, choir baptism. So we went home and I started to read, and I got through 12, and that was bad enough. And I got 13, and I'm like, I don't want to read anymore. Looked like, well, we're home, we can watch the show. And I don't remember what the show was, but it was something we missed because choir practice was always on Wednesday night. So we turned on the show, and back then you didn't really, unless you paid the extra money, you didn't have the guide to know what was on. And the show that we wanted to watch wasn't on. So we changed the channels, because we only had like 4 channels back then. Maybe 5. 5.
I know.
But we switched to another channel to show that it was also on, but it was one that we had watched a lot of reruns. And the episode that was on was one that I had already watched 3 times. So I'm like, okay,
That was 5 channels.
5 channels. So I don't know what she ended up watching or doing, but I said, okay, God, I'm just gonna read these, we're gonna bang them out, we're gonna be done. And as I read through these chapters, I wrote my first. So with that in mind, you understand, my first sermon came from this chapter, because God smacked me upside the head and said, "There's more here than what." So with that as my preface, my first paragraph is 1 through 8. Leviticus 13, 1 and following. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a case of leprous disease on the skin or the body, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, the priests. And the priest shall examine the diseased area on the skin of his body, and if the hair in the diseased area has turned white, and the disease appears to be deeper than the skin on his body, it is a case of leprous disease. When the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if the spot is white on the skin of the body and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair on it has not turned white, the priest shall shut up the diseased person for 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if in his eyes the disease is checked, and the disease has not spread in the skin, the priest shall shut him out for another 7 days. And the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the disease area has faded, and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the eruption spreads in the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again before the priest. And the priest shall look, and if the eruption has spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous disease. Diane, you want to interpret?
Okay. Actually, I didn't know, I mean, we've had medicine there, we've had doctors and everything, but this making the priest the chief medical officer.
Maybe not the chief medical officer, but at least they're the triage doctor for the ER.
Well, that, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, as a child reading the Bible, leprosy was horrible. And there was a time in history that they put them on an island, that it was just only the leper island. And now we have Hansen's disease, and we don't even talk about that leprosy.
We've got diabetic neuropathy. We don't really, we all
But diabetes is not
know, but diabetic neuropathy can cause what they would define as leprosy.
I've never heard that.
Leprosy, for the most part, was any kind of disease that caused the body and the flesh to rot and fall. So if a person, say, has gangrene, that would be diagnosed as leprosy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. Because it would cause the body to rot and fall. And so,
Particularly a skin disease that.
particularly a skin disease, because they couldn't look deeper than that unless it was a gaping wound, and then, but I mean, I think of my mother-in-law who refused to treat her diabetes and sprained her ankle and then burned the bottom of her foot and then didn't know it and ended up getting her foot infected and ended up losing her leg. All because she couldn't feel it anymore. But they wouldn't have a way of diagnosing the fact that her nerve endings
Well, I can believe that, because when I was first diagnosed and I was diagnosed, and I used the finger stick, I said, and as a nurse, I thought, I don't really want to admit this, but I went into my doctor, and Dr. Dix, how are you doing now? Let me look at your fingers, and I said, no, use my fingers, I use my second. She said, do not use your feet, that's where the neuropathy starts. But, you know, there's,
So, but yes, to your point, the priests have bare minimum become the triage doctors, if not the medical personnel of the community. Do you remember what I said on Sunday about priests? The priest's job was to assess the individual and what might keep them from being fully engaged in worship. Therefore, they are medical personnel because that's a reason they might not be able to fully engage in worship. I would hope that if I was a priest that I would not be on door duty, because door duty is the one who gets the look at the leprosy.
Or was leprosy also very deep?
They believe that it is. Again, for them at this point in time in history, any disease that was a skin disease that caused the body to die or to rot was considered leprosy.
that could be a skin melanoma.
Could be a skin melanoma, it could just be diabetic neuropathy, you got cut, you didn't know that it was there, so it got infected, it could actually be the disease, I forget what you called it, that we actually say is leprosy. Huntington's disease, there's a lot of different diseases that we have diagnosed that would end up falling in this category.
Poison ivy?
Poison ivy could fall in this category.
Didn't turn before.
No, but it would be a weeping skin. Especially if you want to drink it, yeah. What?
Was it considered mainly a disease of the adults? Because I'm pretty sure kids have a plethora of diseases that cause them to have these sores on their skin.
Realistically, it was any.
You have to say, go on after being at home for 74 days, a lot of times it was spirit.
That's the thing. If you leave it alone for the first 7 days, then it seems like it has to start. But the second 7 days, after 14 days, you know it's run its course. If it's not run its course, you give it another 7 days. See. Oh, okay. Sure. Any other thoughts? Next paragraph. 9 through 17. When a man is afflicted with a leprous disease, he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall look, and if there is a white swelling in the skin that has turned the hair white, and there is raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic leprous disease in the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if the leprous disease breaks out in the skin, so that the leprous disease covers all the skin and the diseased person from head to toe, so far as the priest can see, then the priest shall look, and if the leprous disease has covered his body, he shall pronounce him clean of the disease. It has all turned white, and he is clean. But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. The priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. Raw flesh is unclean, for it is a leprous disease. But if the raw flesh recovers and turns white again, then he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And if the disease has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce the diseased person clean. He is clean. Have I figured this out yet? Why would they talk about the skin turning white as a sign that everything is good?
Skin.
New skin,
It's not inflamed.
it's not inflamed, so it's not red, and new skin hasn't been in the sun for the melanin to take its full color. Whereas old skin, rotting skin, dead skin, inflamed skin is not going to color. So if it's something like poison ivy, once it's spread to the entire body, it's gonna link its course, it's gonna be done. You're extracting all the dead skin cells off, they'll get a new layer of skin back. But it's not gonna be fun, but at least you know you're not gonna get reinfected. At least not till you go back and play poison ivy. Any other comments for this? You think if, should make the point I was trying to make earlier, if God had told the priests all of the different diseases that we know of today, and then gave them a specific treatment for each and every one of them, you think the people of the day would have listened? Lumps them all together, these are leprous diseases. They are skin diseases that it's very clear this person is. The other thing I noticed in this is, notice when the person has a spreading skin disease, he doesn't say shut them up in their house. Why?
COVID makes you stir crazy.
For the COVID area, yes, being shut up in your house does this. You say
Maybe else.
it would make everybody else sick, it would infect the whole home. So being pushed to go sleep in a tent outside of the camp might sound like a punishment, but it's actually allowing the person to heal faster. Because the disease is trapped in the home with them. Make sense? What you think?
No. I was thinking like reinfection. Getting them out of the house. Probably good. Somebody else contracted it and come back again. They just started a new spot all over.
What do you think, Tim?
Well, I'm just wondering why it don't say new skin, they're white.
Do you think they would know the difference between new skin, old skin, dead skin, living skin?
We just talked about it.
Yes, but I have the benefit of having gone through a couple of health classes in biology course and learning about skin and. But does everybody understand that?
Well, even back then, it wasn't there different races.
Oh, yeah. There are different ethnicities, absolutely. What you thinking, Diane? I saw you smile.
I was thinking, black people and red people and yellow. That, no, is this carte blanche for all of them? And of course, back then, they didn't know all of it. They didn't know all
The irony is, they just said they were mean.
of it. And this is God saying,
This is God saying. He's treated all people equal. It doesn't matter what color of skin they have. Now, yes, there's a little bit of difference, but the reality is, even on a darker skinned person, one of my best friends in college, the person is African American, black and he is dark black. And when he got a cut, it was lighter. It wasn't white, but it was much lighter than the rest of the skin. So I think all new skin is lighter. But I could be wrong. I could be really wrong. Any other thoughts or questions?
Thinking back when I was young. Wow.
When, for example, when we get chicken pox, they have what they call
chicken pot party, you bring all the kids and let them all get exposed. So that it went through the community quicker. I mean, because there was like an 8 week time in the Christian household where, you know, it was just one boy, the three of us after another. And we now know of herd immunity. But yeah, you're right. When you're together in close proximity, everybody's going to get it. Any other thoughts? Keep going. 18 through 23. If there is a skin, if there is in the skin of one's body a boil, and it heals, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling or a reddish white spot, then it shall be shown to the priest, and the priest shall look, and if it appears deeper than the skin, and its hair has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and it is a case of leprous disease that has broken out into the boil. But if the priest examines it and there was no white hair, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And if it spreads in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, it is a disease. But if the spot remains in one place and does not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him. Someone asked a question. Nobody asked it yet. Why are they concerned with whether or not the hair turns white?
The follicles thin.
If the hair turns white, it means the follicle is dead, and therefore the disease is deeper than what you think. Not same kind of. Oh. Sorry, brother. Guess when your hair turns white, you lose it, it doesn't grow back. But this is a simple way of identifying whether or not this is just a surface level disease or if it's gotten deeper into the deeper layers of the skin and the tissue. Because when a hair follicle turns white, it means that that whole area is. Now, the hair can eventually grow back, but it takes a lot longer for that area of skin to heal to the point where it can. So while this is definitely not 21st century medicine, this is extremely advanced medicine. Any other thoughts?
Who wrote all this down?
My personal opinion is I believe it was Joshua. I believe that God told Moses, it says that he told Moses and Aaron. Joshua was Moses' scribe for a long time. It even seems to imply, as we talked about in the book of Exodus, that Joshua went up on the mountain with Moses. And so my guess is Joshua wrote this down. But there are lots and lots of theories about it. And they range from, it was written 1,000 years after the time it was claimed because they would have made this stuff up to tell people what to do, all the way to where it was probably Moses and Aaron that wrote it down because that's what it says. They were the ones who told us. They wrote it down. My personal theory is it was Joshua. I believe Joshua wrote down the first 5 books and most of them Joshua. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. Next one, 24 through 28. Or when the body has a burn in its skin, raw flesh from the burn becomes the spot, reddish white or white. We shall examine it, and if the hair in the spot has turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, then it is a leprous disease. It has broken out in the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a case of leprous disease. But if the priest examines it, and there is no white hair in the spot, and it is no deeper than the skin, but has faded, The priest shall shut him up for 7 days, and the priest shall examine him the seventh. If it is spreading in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a case of leprous disease. But if the spot remains in one place and does not spread in the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, or it is a scar from the burn. Thoughts?
It wouldn't, the air there, bad burn.
Right. They're burned before the skin.
But do you see now where leprous disease takes on a lot of connotations? Essentially, for them, I would almost say leprous disease is any infection
Yeah.
of the skin, at least, yes. Any other thoughts, or keep going? All right, 29 through 37. When a man or woman has a disease on the head or the beard, the priest shall examine the disease, and if it appears deeper than the skin, and the hair in it is yellow and thin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an itch, a leprous disease on the head or the beard. And if the priest examines the itching disease, and it appears no deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up the person with the itching disease for 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine the disease. If the itch has not spread, and there is in it no yellow hair, the itch appears to be no deeper than the skin, then he shall shave himself. But the itch he shall not shave, and the priest shall shut up the person with the itching disease for another 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine the itch. If the itch has not spread in the skin, and appears to be no deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the itch spreads in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him, and if the itch has spread in the skin, the priest need not ask for the yellow hair, he is unclean. But if in his eyes the itch is unchanged, and black hair grows in it, the itch is healed, and he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean.
He didn't have his lungs, did
Yellow hair plus.
So the yellow used to be, it was white, so this,
The yellow is puffy infection. And this is talking mostly about on your head where you grow, where we actually leave our hair. For many people, for much of history, they started shaving early on. Well, why? It just was something that they started doing. And so this is talking about things where you grow hair naturally. And so it's, why do you think that they would say to shave it here?
maybe to get a better look at the skin?
One, to get a better look at the skin. Why else?
Well, if it's fuzzy, it's mad.
Yes, that's another reason. Infected skin will not grow hair. Healthy skin will. So if you shave everything, you can tell whether or not it's healthy and regrow. But if you leave it long, your beard or your head, you might be able to take that spot, but you can't tell whether, it's been 7 days. Or do they have a magic marker that the permanent marker and they circle? This is the follicle that was diseased. And so by shaving their head or their beard or both, it would allow proof that the area had healed and it was growing hair. Make sense? And it would itch as it's growing. Which is why I think they call it an itching disease. Because when the hair on the head starts growing, it really does itch. Any other thoughts? Keep
But like
going.
I said,
There's no blonde, I mean, that's seriously. But barely, everybody has black hair. In that area.
Most of our genetics, it's Caucasians, blonde, light brown hair, red hair, all of those come from European descent. For the most part. There would have been golden hair. But they would have been very. Vast majority of Jewish people were at least as dark as we think of most Arab people, maybe darker yet. In fact, there are many people, many historians who've done some genetic testings that say that the Jewish people were borderline black. Not as dark as Africans, but maybe darker than Egyptians or other Arab peoples. But they also would be a mix of all kinds of people. Because remember, there were people from Egypt who joined them, there were people from Indian that joined them. But for the most part, everyone had.
It's kind of like Frank, when he just did the DNA, he's always been told, I always thought his entire life was in part Hispanic. And they did the 23andMe or whatever, and found out he's not Hispanic at all, he's
Well, he is Spanish.
Spanish,
Not
not
Hispanic. Our friend, if you look at him, he looks very Hispanic. And ironically, he took a church in Texas and looked like, it's kind of like I'm going home. That's what I thought, but when they did the genetic testing, 23andMe, they found out it was actually what they call Black Irish, which is Spanish, Irish mix, and people of the Ibanez Peninsula, partially because of their sun, but you know, they get a lot on the Mediterranean, they get a lot of sun. But they were also darker skinned than most of the rest of the Europeans. And so that's what he was told us, that his darker complexion comes from that Spanish heritage through Ireland. We in America, probably more than any other point in human history, are the most homogenized skin type anyone ever in the country. Which is ironic to think whenever we travel, now, is to think we travel. I think realistically, yes, and most of the people would die.
I know the translucent before, that's why.
Any other thoughts? Keep going. 3839. When a man or a woman has spots in the skin of the body, white spots, the priest shall look, and if the spot on the skin of the body are of a dull white, it is a leukoderma that has broken out on the skin, he is clean. What's a leukoderma? Diane, you're our resident nurse. And
It is chapter TETER. TETER. I didn't know what that meant either.
I'm gonna see what the Hebrew says.
This doesn't keep one birds, yeah, so.
Yeah, watch, it's gonna be something very simple like that. Leukoderma just sounds more. 38.
Tetanus, a skin disease in humans or animals causing itchy or pustular patches, such as eczema or ringing.
Says literally blotchy white. This is the. So this is just basically any disease. Right. Any, nothing, other than the fact we get to do work, nothing to do here, right? Go ahead. Anybody figure out what my sermon was about yet?
Skin disease.
Keep going. 40 to 43. If a man's hair falls out of his, he is bald, he is clean. If a man's hair falls out from his forehead, he has baldness of the forehead. But if he has on the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white diseased area, it is a leprous disease breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine him, and if the diseased swelling is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, like the appearance of the leprous disease in the skin of the body, he is a leprous man and is unclean. The priest must pronounce him unclean. His disease is on his head. Jim, Gary, Steve, you guys are not unclean because you got some balding work. You're not automatically kicked out of society because you lose your hair. His whole body turns red. I don't think that's the same thing. Especially when he's embarrassed to do it.
Well, my theory is, here has roots, and if I'm gonna be doing the brain part, put it up against the skull there, and
Next chapter. 45 to 46. The leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head hang loose. He shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp.
Got hair on it or not?
What happens when you have your hair on the lip?
Okay.
He's yelling, unclean, unclean.
you're not spreading.
He's not spitting it out. So one, this is to keep the person from accidentally causing somebody else to get disease. Two, it's keeping everybody else healthy. And three, it's acknowledging that the person who's dealing with the disease has a responsibility to let everybody else know. You need to stay away from me right now, it's not good. Okay.
Right, you can use your hands anymore, it's unsafe.
47 to 52. When there is a case of leprous disease in a garment, whether a woolen or linen garment, wrap or linen, or in the skin or anything made of skin, if the disease is greenish or reddish in the garment, or in the skin, or in the wasp, or in any article made of skin, it is a case of leprous disease. It shall be shown to the priest, and the priest shall examine the disease and shut up that which has the disease for 7 days. Then he shall examine the disease on the 7th day. If the disease has spread in the garment, in the warp or of the woof, or in the skin, whatever be use of the skin, the disease is a persistent leprous disease, it is unclean. He shall burn the garment, or the wool or the linen, or any article made of skin that is diseased, for it is a persistent leprous disease, it shall be burned in the fire. What do you think?
I just not burning it. Why is it burning my clothing?
Okay,
You got drainage on cloth. I don't know why they couldn't wash it instead of burn it,
so if it's something that has actually started growing and infecting
but that's different.
a fabric, because remember this is talking about whether or not it's spread. The first 7 days you quarantine it. If it has spread, You don't wash it, you burn it. But if it hasn't spread, we haven't gotten to what to do with that.
I didn't know leprosy could grow on non-living tissue.
Again, leprosy is any infectious type disease.
The other thing, you're talking about two real fabrics, wool or linen. And that's different than what we have now. We have those, but
Right?
that, now we have so many synthetics into them.
Wool, linen, leather. It's talking, it says skin, but it really should say. Yours says leather. We would know what it is. These are things, though, that once they become infected with growth, mildew, mold, infection, anything like that, it can spread.
Perhaps they didn't treat the leather then like they do now. You wouldn't necessarily see it now, but it could have been possible maybe with the leather not properly treated.
Oh, I think they treated leather better back than we do today. We're gonna have to just throw it away. Remember what God said at the beginning of this whole thing. If you follow my rules, you'll have no diseases, you'll have no miscarriages, and your resources will not wear out. Remember that? He literally says your sandals will not wear out. But he's talking about everything you have. What you came out of Egypt with will be enough to get you through till you get to the promised land so that you can grow the cotton, grow the fibers from them. You can harvest the skin of the animals and make the leather. But when you're traveling, do you really have time to let things cure? No. So part of God's rules in this instance are about seeing that cloth is extremely valuable. Just a couple of weeks ago, we went down to Burn Heritage Days or whatever it was. And, there's a guy making linen, putting it together, making linen yarn. Talk about the process. A couple weeks before that, we were down in southern Indiana, saw how we do that. Linen with cotton. It takes a long time to spin wool into yarn, then take yarn and make it into cloth. And then, once it's there, then someone like Joyce can take it and make something wonderful out of it.
The animals, and you gotta shear.
Oh, yeah. Then there's that whole thing of harvesting the reeds, or shearing the sheep, and caring for the animal, or growing the reeds so that you can harvest them. This is not a minor task. Oh, and leather, you gotta kill the animal. You're not getting a second round of leather out of the animal. And if you don't treat it right, then it will spoil and the whole thing is.
So do they use the leather from the sacrificed animals?
Oh, I'm absolutely certain. They wouldn't let anything go to waste if they could help.
Or else would be.
Or else would you get leather? Exactly. It's not like you can go down to the leather shop. We can synthetically print leather. 3D printers.
Vegan leather.
What?
Vegan, artificial.
Artificial vegan leather. Do you get what I'm saying there? This is an instance when God says, today, if we get a garment that's stained, we just toss it, right? And buy something new. We get something that's you said, I'm not keeping it, I'll burn it. But we can go to Walmart or any number of places, boutiques in town, and we can get new clothes. Bare minimum, it's not that difficult to get fabric and make something. And it doesn't take that, it takes a while. So I don't want to diminish what you do. But compared to what they had to do, a sewing machine puts an article together pretty quick. You have to sew everything by hand and you remember talking about all the details they put on their clothes. You get a new shirt, that's like a once a year gift. It's not like a once a week, let's go down to Walmart and buy a new shirt. And so God is caring for even their limited resources of clothes that they wear.
Well, if your clothes get mildew and stuff like that, I mean, it makes them weak,
It does, yeah.
so they're not structurally sound.
But are you starting to see where I'm going with this? Next paragraph. 53. And if the priest examines, and if the disease has not spread in the water or of the roof, or any article made of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the disease, and he shall shut it up for another 7 days. And the priest shall examine the diseased thing after it has been washed. And if the appearance of the diseased area has not changed, though the disease has not spread, it is unclean. We shall burn it in the fire, whether the rot is on the back or on the front. So, first round, it hasn't spread. Now we wash it and we set it aside for another. If it has spread or it's still there to the same extent, it ain't going anywhere. You're just going to keep it. Right? Any other thoughts before we read the next one? 56. But if the priest examines it, and if the disease area has faded after it has been washed, he shall tear it out of the garment, or the skin, or the work, or the wound. Then, if it appears again in the garment, any article made of skin, it is spreading. You shall burn it with fire, whatever has the disease. But the garment, or the lark, or the wolf, or any article made of skin from which the disease departs, when you have washed it, shall then be washed a second time and be clean. So cut out the bad spot, keep everything else. You gotta wash it twice. Let it sit in between to make sure that it didn't affect the rest of the dog. Make sense? You going? Let's finish the chapter. This is the law for a case of leprous disease in a garment or of wool or linen, either in the wart or any article made of skin, to determine whether it is clean or not. Again, it's about preserving not just people, but our stuff. Any questions on 13? Anybody figured out the sermon yet? Okay, we go. 14, 1 through 9. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this shall be the law of the leprous person for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall look. Then, if the case of leprous disease is healed in a leprous person, the priest shall command them to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 live clean birds and cedar wood and a scarlet yarn. And the priest shall command them to kill one of the birds in an earthenware vessel over the fresh water. Shall take the live bird with the cedar wood and the scarlet yarn, and dip them in the live bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. He shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed of leprous disease. Then he shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird go into the open field. And he who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shall shave on all of his hair, and bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean. And after that he may come into the camp, but live outside his tent 7 days. And on the 7th day he shall shave off all his hair from his beard and his eyebrows. He shall shave off all his hair, and then he shall wash his clothes, and bathe his body in water, and he shall
Even his eyebrows, huh?
What do you think?
How does a priest have time to do anything else?
There's a reason it wasn't just Aaron and his family, it was the entire clan of Levi were to assist in the work of the tabernacle.
How does he miraculously get no more disease? No, I mean, he's living outside the camp with all the other lepers and, I mean, we read it in, Jesus one that he miracles, that he heals them. But here, how does it take a turnaround? And there's no medical, there's no,
So remember, leprous disease is a whole family. We would diagnose many different things. Some of them just have to run their course. Some of them, like diabetic neuropathy, you don't get better from that. You can't, you just don't grow new nerve endings. But for many of these people, they were set outside, and it wasn't until much later that they began to congregate into what we now call the colony. Because realistically, they wanted to get better, so they would stay away from everyone else to not get what they had. I gotta get healed from my own thing, I don't want to contract your thing too. But for the people who had the diseases that didn't get better, those are the ones who congregate. But most people would get better and they would be restored to the community. Does that make sense? There was only a very small amount that weren't restored. And to your point about Jesus' healing of the 10 lepers, notice what Jesus tells the one who comes and tells him thank you. He says, go to the temple and offer the offering that you're supposed to offer so that you can be restored to the community. Yes, he was healed, but that would not mean that he would be allowed back into the community. If he didn't go through this process, and the priest said he's clean, doesn't matter if you say you're clean, if the priest said you're unclean, you're unclean. So this process here, what Jesus tells the one who comes to thanks him, it's a way of restoring the person, not just to health, but restoring them within the community, that they are not infectious and they're not going to get sick. Does that help a little? Any other thoughts? We're going to, my goodness, I'm getting 10 through 20. And on the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs without commission, 1 ewe lamb, a year old, without commission, a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, and 1 log of, and the priest who cleanses him shall set the man who is to be cleansed, and these things before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 of the male lambs and offer it for the guilt offering along with log of oil, and wave them for wave offering. And he shall kill the lamb in the place where he killed the sin offering and the burnt offering in the place of the sanctuary. The guilt offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then the priest shall take some of the oil, pour it into the palm of his own left hand, and dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and sprinkle some oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And some of the oil that remains in his hand, the priest shall put it onto the lobe of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand shall be put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, and the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. The priest shall offer the sin offering to make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. And afterward he shall kill the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him, he shall be clean. Anybody recognize this ritual? Anybody remember what this is from?
Between the priests.
When they ordained the priests. Why would they go through the same ritual of ordination to somebody who was leprous and is now being brought back? I got an idea. You shall be the kingdom of priests. Everyone in Israel was to be priests to the nations. This is a way of not just saying that they are cleansed, but they are holy. They are set apart for God. They are absolutely wanted, not just welcome, wanted in the body.
All right, I have a question about that.
Okay?
That they should kill the burnt offering. It's already been burned, surely did.
Do you not remember when we talked about the burnt offering, you kill it, then you burn the whole thing on the altar? That's what a burn is. So yes, you have to kill it first. You gotta let all the blood out. You gotta take the organs that you're not supposed to deal with, and you're supposed to dump them outside. And then you're supposed to put everything else on the altar.
So it's called the burnt offering.
It's called a burnt offering before it's even burnt because of the purpose of the whole thing was going to be given over to God because we're seeking God's answer or blessing.
Makes sense.
So think about that. Going back to the story of Jesus cleansing the 10 lepers. This man who came and said, "Thank you to Jesus." Jesus says, "Go to the temple and perform the ritual so that you can be reintegrated into society." And he wouldn't just be reintegrated in society, he would be ordained for the task of serving God. So Jesus wasn't just restoring this person. Jesus was actually restoring this person and inviting them to follow him because he would be ordained to be one of his disciples.
Kind of like our pastors did on the
Maybe. I don't know, again, your preacher's a little amazing, I don't know.
Listen.
Any other thoughts? Keep going. 21 through 32. But if he is poor and cannot afford seed, then he shall take one male lamb for a guilt offering to be weighed to make atonement for him, and a tenth of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, and a log of oil, also 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, whichever he can afford. One shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. And on the 8th day he shall bring them for his cleansing to the priest to the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall take the lamb, the guilt offering, and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. He shall kill the lamb with the guilt offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of his right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. And the priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and he shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left hand 7 times. The priest shall put some of the oil that is in his hand on the lobe of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, in the place where the blood of the guilt offering is. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. He shall offer turtle doves or pigeons, whichever he can afford, one for a sin offering, the other for a burnt offering, along with the grain offering. And the priest shall make atonement before the Lord for him is to be cleansed. This is the law for him in whom is a case of leprous disease, who cannot afford the offerings for his cleansing.
And just saying that you shouldn't treat a poor man different than a rich man.
God says if you can afford it, you should do it. But But if you can't afford it, I'm not gonna cast you away because you can't. You don't get off, you don't bring 2 pigeons or 2 turtle doves just because you're rich and you want to. But if you can't afford it, God's not, oh, sorry, you're too poor, you don't have a place in it.
What is a log?
What's yours say? A quart? Quart? So probably just a jar of some size. 1/3.
Up there.
Is there any significance? There's been 7 days for everything, but here it's just on the 8th.
So after you've had the 7 days of separation, the next day is when you need to restore. Of course, we already know the 7 days is the cycle of creation and life and the resting on the 7th day. And so the 8th day starts a new cycle, and therefore we will be made whole on the 8th day. Anybody starting to see that this is, while again, it still sounds very foreign to you, and we see that God is really being very caring for his people and doing his part to make sure that people aren't just cast aside because they're poor, aren't just cast aside because they've gotten sick and no fault of their own. And not only does he welcome people back in once they're well, and not only does he just reinstate them, but he says, I'm going to take it a step further, and show that you are getting the same treatment that I give to the priests who I invited into my service. Any thoughts? Okay. We're going to finish 14. And normally I would read a paragraph at a time. There's 4 sections here. I'm going to read it all so that I can tell you about my sermon. So, 33 through the end of the chapter, 57. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I give you for a possession, and I put a case of leprous disease in a house in the land of your possession, then he who owns a house shall come and tell the priest, there seems to me to be some case of disease in my house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes to examine the disease, lest all that is in the house be declared. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house, and he shall examine the disease. And if the disease is in the walls of the house with greenish or reddish spots, and if it appears to be deeper than the surface, the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look. The disease had spread in the walls of the house, and the priest shall command that they take out the stones in which is diseased and throw them into an unclean place outside the city. And he shall have the inside of the house scraped all around, and the plaster that they scrape off they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones, and he shall take other plaster and plaster the house. If the disease breaks out again in the house, after he has taken out the stone, scrape the house and plaster it, then the priest shall go and look. If the disease has spread in the house, it is a persistent leprous disease in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, stones and timbers, and all the plaster of the house, and they shall carry them out of the city to an unclean place. Moreover, whoever enters the house while shut up shall be unclean until the evening. Whoever sleeps in the house shall wash his clothes, and whoever eats in the house shall wash his clothes. But if the priest comes and looks, and if the disease has not spread in the house, after the house was plastered, then the priest shall announce that the house is clean, for the disease is healed. And for the cleansing of the house, he shall take 2 small birds with cedar wood and scarlet yarn and hyssop, and shall kill one of the birds in an earthenware vessel over the fresh water, and shall take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet yarn along with the live bird, dip them in the blood of the bird that was killed in fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Thus he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with the fresh water, and with the bird, the live bird, with cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet yarn. And he shall let the live bird go out of the city into the open country, so he shall make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for any case of leprous disease, for an itch, for a leprous disease in a garment or in a house, and for a swelling or eruption or a spot, to show when it is unclean and it is clean. This is the law for a leprous disease. What do you notice in that section? Oh, I read it all over.
I don't think correlated with.
Absolutely, it is symbolism. What else? Anything else? Anybody find where I got my concern at?
You got the leper's house.
Didn't have a leper's house. So it wouldn't surprise me if my dad, who didn't finish the house for 23 years that he was building it and put up the last sheet of drywall and ran it as a year old. He had started working on it before I was born. It wouldn't have surprised me if it didn't have something. So the week that all this happened, when we were at church that Sunday, it's not that I don't think it was common. I think cancer has been around forever. In fact, they found Egyptian sarcophagi that are 5,000 years old that had tumors. But we just didn't know about cancer as much. But that Sunday, I think there were 2 people who had announced that they had gotten cancer. They were asking for prayers for healing. And in our little bitty country church, probably about 75 people, and you get 2 people in the same week, now they have a very similar diagnosis. It just kind of hits them. And as I was reading this section, and I came to that section where it was talking about once we know that the garment is clean, we can cut the section out, and eventually you'll sew it in. And remember what Jesus said about when you cut out a section, you don't put new fabric there attached to the old fabric, because it will shrink and it will tear the fabric and everything will. And in my head, as I was praying for these 2 people who live with cancer, and I can't even remember who the word was, and I was reading through this, and I was just trying to wanted to get through it, because this just did not sound fun at all to me. Definitely, because who wants to deal with pus and dead skin and mold and mildew and disease in the walls and the clothes? I heard God say, if I care this much for clothing and houses that you can tear down and rebuild, replace, how much more do I care for you as a person? And in that moment, I was also struggling with my own temptations and struggles, and I've been praying, God, why won't you just get rid of this sin? Why won't you just get rid of this disease? And he said, I don't cut it out from the start. Because just like we know with cancer, we want to shrink that tumor as small as we can get it, and only cut out what has to be done. And I had this picture of God treating our sin like a surgeon treats tumor. We want to get it all. We don't want to get anything else than what has to be. And the reality is that most of our sins are also tied to an integral part of who we are as a person. They're tied to our history. They're tied to our successes and how they might get dwarfed. And so God is saying, I don't want to cut out any of you that's good. And so I will let you struggle with the sin while you're walking alongside me until I can shrink that sin, so I can get it to where it's only the part that needs to be removed, and then I will cut that. And I will leave absolutely everything else in, because you are good, You are holy. I just found this. That the God of the universe wouldn't just care for me, but he'd care for all of us stuff too. And not want us to have to worry about replacing stuff, because he doesn't want us to worry about anything. And if God would care about our stuff, how much more would he care about us? And in these weird rules of skin disease, and mold, and mildew, and discharge we're going to get into in chapter 15, I saw the love of God in a way I had never seen before. Because not too long before that, I had dealt with my uncle who was diagnosed with brain cancer. He had to go through 6 months of radiation before they could go in and operate. Took the tumor out, but they said they could not get the fingers. Because if they took the fingers out of it, it's gotten too far into the brain and taken important parts of his personality, parts of his memories, parts of him and how he acted in his finite motor skills. So I saw again that God says, I care this much for these things. How much more do I care for you and your sinfulness? Yes, it hurts. Yes, I don't want you to. Yes, I don't want you to have that thorn in the flesh. But I will leave it there long enough to do your part, to shrink it down to just what needs to be done. And I'll get rid of that and replace it back with myself. I just saw the Lord God. Now, I don't know that anybody in the home church felt it was a sermon period, but they were glad to, they said, good job. And then the next thing I was preaching in the church. So you know, I don't know how this, but for me, the first sermon came out. We don't need to be preaching on something very different. You can do as you please, but I will note your lack of attendance.
I know, but you won't have liquor. So.
I will absolutely note your lack of attendance. I hope that you guys have seen as we've gone through these books. Yeah, Genesis, we know the story, but the stories were so much richer if you start paying attention. Yes, we know the stories of the first half of Exodus, but they took on new depths as we paid attention. But the second half of Exodus and even the book of Leviticus, when you start asking questions about it still might be confusing, but we begin to see something that points to the reality of loving God who wants the best. He made them a promise, and then he gave them a way for them to receive that promise. That to me is just amazing. That God would care enough to not just say, hey, just don't do that. But here's why you don't do that. And here's how, if you've done that, you can be made right. Pretty different. Any final thoughts? Over the next couple of weeks, there might be some playing around with things. I've been talking to a number of people in here, and I might be here, I might not. I know this month I'm definitely not going to be here. On the 12th of October, I'm not going to be here. I want you guys to understand. I truly believe that anyone who's just willing to ask those three questions, right, could lead anyone else in a Bible discussion. Because I know that the Holy Spirit is growing each and every one of us. And Jesus promises in John's Gospel that where the Spirit is, he will lead us into all So I'm hoping that some of you might decide to step up as we kind of transition. I'm gonna do my best to get us through Leviticus before we hit the holiday season. But I hope that you guys might consider keeping this going. And yes, I don't know if Chris Carr is on there, okay, I'm also working on the other end to encourage them to consider allowing me to continue to Zoom Bible studies. And if you guys don't have someone who teaches me, you're always welcome to watch mine on YouTube. And I don't know if we'll go to numbers or not yet, but I love this, and I love you guys. I want everyone to understand, this is not a foreign, and it's not difficult to understand. It just takes us being intentional about inviting God in, letting Him speak to us as we ask Him what He wants us to see. Is that fair enough? So with that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you and I praise you that even in the midst of passages we don't want to, Lord, that you would show us your love. That you would show us your care. Lord, I pray that we would take these truths to heart. And that we would be your priests, this your world, to your people who have yet to hear, don't know you. Lord, may we share your love. May we share your concern. We show your care. So you might. If I'm here next week, or whoever's here, hopefully you guys will do 15. I was hoping to get through it, so you wouldn't have to. But we'll look at that and keep moving forward. An odd place for love. So the best service position, we're gonna have a short, maybe half-hour service, and sing a couple, 3 songs, and I'll just. This person, technically, I think, supposedly it starts around the 6th hour. It's the service just before sunset. They used to have service for the hour. Early Easter, they have. Bring in fire. Yeah. That's why I said what you said.
I put him in the car. So, and I have to be. When we raise the box.
Then.
Yeah, just bring him. Yeah, I think there's maybe 10 donuts. We had one of those last Sunday night. They came out and started fire and seasoned the pot, yeah.